Well, hello again to you fine people of all different types. My name is Sam and welcome back to Weird Mind Newsroom, where I delve into talking all things there is to catch up on the new content that has released for this week, including new releases, trailers, and news from the week of entertainment media. So let's not waste time on all these introductions and let's dive into talking all things media that this week has to offer.
It's alive!
So let's begin on new releases, and we talk on a character that has been a staple of the movie scene for about 4 decades now, and has gone from the jungles to the cities and even to fighting against the most dangerous organism of deep space. But this time around, where we would see him as the presumed antagonist, this time we may be rooting for it to prove their worth and be more of a hero role, as Prey director Dan Trachtenberg is coming back once more to his popular franchise, and the second time for this franchise this year, with a new film of Predator Badlands. Now the film will be set in a distant future and see a young Predator who's been cast out of his clan and outgunned against human survivors, who will find himself an ally in Fia, a young female android, and will soon embark on a long, treacherous journey in search of the ultimate adversary and to prove his worth to his kind. Reception on this new entry, similar to the other projects by Prey and Killer's director, has been very well received, with praise on the concept, perspective of the character, story, visuals, action, and some of the humor, with some small critiques feeling a little CG can be a bit messy in places or could be a little more structured properly, but it seems overall that Trachtenberg is the right man for some new life into this franchise. And if you want to check it out for yourself, it is available to check out now in cinemas. Our next big title release is the return of an iconic creation from the minds of this acclaimed Mexican director, where you may have seen many of his unique creations of monsters and creatures of the night in many forms of action and comics, to even as far as a love story. But it's time to take a page from a classic and give his own spin on the original man-made monster, as we have finally been given the release, albeit after a disastrous limited cinema release, of Guillermo del Toro's take on Frankenstein. And the film will be set in Eastern Europe in the 19th century and will follow Dr. Preterius, who will be on a mission to track down Frankenstein's monster, believed to have died in a fire 40 years ago, in order to continue and honor the experiments and research that was created by the former Dr. Frankenstein himself. Now, reception on this new take on the classic novel has been very well received as well, with praise to the story, its characters and performances, visual aesthetic and effects, and for being a well-crafted love letter to the original man-made monster story. And if you want to check it out to see how this comes to life, you can watch this now on Netflix. Now, our next movie this week, I'm sure we have all heard some form of the old saying about the ideals that first comes love, then comes marriage, and then at some point about a baby in a baby carriage. That is if you're more than wanting a child, of course, as well. But in the case of this, it seems like there is a bit of an effect to the aftermath of that third part, as this next project will be showing in some way or another, as we have the newest film from the studio Mubai, who brings us the release of the new, unsettling dark comedy drama, the movie of Die, My Love. Now it follows a young couple of Grace, played by Jennifer Lawrence, and Jackson, played by Robert Pattinson, who move from New York to rural Montana to have a quieter life. As they soon adjust to their new surroundings and become parents for the first time, Grace soon begins to struggle with postpartum depression and feelings of isolation and psychological distress, and deteriorating mental health soon drives their marriage into unsettling and unpredictable territory. Now, reception on this film from the film festivals and up to release seems to be very well received, with praise for the performances of the main leads, particularly with Jennifer Lawrence, and for the depiction of a common effect that some mothers experience post-birth that is not often given a focus on. Though some of the stylized aspects and themes in the film may be a little more mixed or lost in some of the people in the film, but if you're up for seeing this new film itself, then you can catch this new movie out now in cinemas. Our last movie of the week is seeing the return of an actor that has been a few times now and then seems to have retired from this industry in acting, but seems to be finding himself back for another go around on the film that really piques their interest, and it seems to be no exception with this new project, as he's back in the starring role in a new film being directed by his own son of Roland Day-Lewis, as of the release of the new movie known as Anemone. The film will focus and tell the story of a troubled recluse played by Daniel Day-Lewis, who soon comes into contact with his estranged brother played by Sean Bean, who arrives back into his life and must find a way to convince him to come home and reunite with his family. Now, reception on this film has seen a bit more of a mixed outcome, with the likes of the cinematography performances are praised, particularly with the return of Day-Lewis in the lead role. The film has been hit with a more of a critique in the form of the screenplay being a little bit messy and all over the place, but I'm sure we'll have some appreciate the famous actor's return. If you want to check it out for yourself, you can catch this film also out now in cinemas. Now, moving from films to shows, our first one of the week is seeing return of a new series created by the creator of one of the most critically acclaimed duo of shows in modern history, of a high school teacher turned drug kingpin and the life of an underworld lawyer, as they are back to bring with them a new twisted take on the world ravaged by a strange outbreak that has some strange outcomes for a select dozen, as we have the release of the new series from Vince Gilligan known simply as Pluribus. Now, set in New Mexico, the series will follow novelist Carl Sturka, played by Reed Seahorn, who is one of the only 12 people in the world that is immune to an extraterrestrial virus that transforms the world's population into a peaceful and content hive mind that has become known as the Others. Now, reception of this new series from Gilligan seems to be very well received, with praise on this new take of the sci-fi genre and for the focus on suspense and social commentary that it delivers, as well as seen as one of the year's best new series of television. And if you're up to watch, check it out for yourself. The first 2 episodes are now available to stream on Apple TV Plus, with a new episode releasing every Friday. However, for our second show of the week, it will not need much of a trial or discussion, and while a civil battle may occur, it will all come together in the end, and if things go awry, at least those working will look good while doing so. As Ryan Murphy is going from killers to legal drama with the release of the new series of All's Fair. This series will follow a successful divorce lawyer played by Kim Kardashian, and the owners of an all-female law firm in LA, and will show them prove that to many that being a lawyer is not just a man's job, and in the process will look good while doing so. However, reception on this series, however, has been critically panned to all hell, where it's been, for a bit of time, it was sitting at a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and has become the 15th media piece to receive a 0 from The Guardian. That's saying something. With many issues stemming to the bad writing and the very lackluster and poor performances from the lead star of Kardashian, has been seen as one of the worst shows in recent memory and the worst show of this year. But if you are mortally curious to check it out, you can watch the first 3 episodes now on Disney Plus, with a new episode releasing every Tuesday. And the last of the releases for this week, and the only focused title of a game, besides the inclusion of the third game of the popular found footage horror titles of A Man and the Adventurer, is taking us back to the vast lands of the Kingdom of Hyrule, where we will be given some bit of clues in the recent game about the trials and containment of the Demon King. But in this title, we will be getting a whole more of a better context to it all, as with the release of the third game in the popular crossover battle series, with the release of Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. Now, this title will take the inspiration from the story and the lore alluded to in the Memories of Tears of the Kingdom, where we will follow the story of Princess Zelda after she is transported back in time to the early days of the Kingdom of Hyrule, and help the original rulers and the 4 champions of the land join forces to battle their way to save the kingdom and imprison the Demon King of Ganondorf and stop him before he destroys the land in his image. Now, reception on this new title seems to be well received, with praising the expanding of the story beats from Tears of the Kingdom, the roster of characters to play and choose from, the gameplay and visual aesthetic, and seeing as well as established side piece the long way to follow up to the acclaimed game. If you want to play it for yourself, it is available to play now on Nintendo Switch too. And with all that regards, that's all the new releases that we do have for this week. Now, moving from new releases to trailers, and our first of those we'll focus on is with me bringing you to ask a very simple question. Are you ready for Freddy once again? As we're taking a trip back to the expansive franchise of these pizza parlors once more, with some new additions and updates made, as we have the final trailer release to the sequel to the popular indie horror game turned film adaptation of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Now, the film is set a year after the events of the original movie, with the characters experiencing the supernatural events of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, with the stories of what occurred being twisted into a campy local legend that spans the first ever Fazfest. Now, former security guard Mike and police officer Vanessa have kept the truth from Mike's little sister Abby about the fate of her animatronic friends, but one night when she sneaks out to reconnect with Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, it will soon set in motion a terrifying series of events that reveals dark secrets about the true origins of Freddy's, and unleashing a long-forgotten horror that was hidden away for decades. As a fan of the franchise for a bit of time now, I can see the likes of where some of the concept of what they can do with a plot of the series. As you know, if you've known the franchise, the series is a bit not always straightforward, and for the length of the last decade or more, many fans and theorists have tried to piece the lore of this series together in some cohesive way, because they're not really straightforward with the plot in these stories. Then I can understand the sense of confusion and mixed appeal from a few critics and others that may not overly familiar with the games, and lore that probably made them feel like the film was lacking. Now, I went to see the original and enjoyed it a fair bit, albeit with some issues that I will get to my eventual review of this movie. I feel it seems like the creators involved knows the fans want, and from the footage, it looks like another hopefully promising outcome that maybe could get some stronger appeal over time. But I guess we'll see either way. I'm excited to check this out, and not too long away, as the show will begin in just over a month's time on December 5th. Next to the trailers is seeing us taking a trip to the focus of another life of a famous face in the industry, and while we have had some memorable ones like the iconic frontman of Queen, the Rocket Man himself, and even the likes of a recent form of a man born to run, a poor man's attempt at Ziggy Stardust, and the king of rock and roll, this one will take the title of king, but for more in the realm of pop. As out of some time and some delay from its initial release at the beginning of last month, we were finally given a trailer for the new biopic known simply as Michael. Now, the film will of course follow the life and career of Michael Jackson, that's played by Jackson's actual cousin of Jafar Jackson, as we follow the legacy of his career from the early days as a member of the Jackson 5 all the way to pop superstardom in the 80s and beyond. So like this film was such a mystery, and one that I had wondered about for a long time what approach they would go for this movie, as it had a bit of a rocky development from working over a few years ago, a couple of delays out of this year, and some reports that they had to rework some elements of the third act due to some legal issues with the portrayal of someone that caused some scandal for the artist in the early 90s, and discussions of it being split into 2 movies. From what I can see, the 2 film concept may still be a thing if it seems to be focusing on the career up to where he popped off success in the 80s, and a second maybe the more scandals and questionable approach inappropriate conduct alleged against him up until his death around 16 years ago. And given reports the film is apparently aiming around 3.5 hours just for this first one, I would not be surprised at this outcome. But I'm interested in checking out, and hopefully a more manageable runtime will be given to us by the film's release in the cinemas from the 24th of April next year. Our last trailer for the week, and I'm sure is aware of a case of the tales of gods and ancient powerful beings that we were told of as tales as young children, but in the case of this one, they live among us in the modern setting, and when things go into chaos, it will take one young hero who may be half god, but only sure has had a lot of might, as after 2 years since we were first introduced to this character, we have gotten a presumed final trailer for the upcoming second season of the adaptation of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. The new season will be based on the second novel of the series with Sea of Monsters and be set a year after the events of season 1, with Percy returning back to Camp Half-Blood, finding it out under threat by Kronos' forces and Grover now appearing to be missing. This will see Percy go on a quest to the Sea of Monsters to find and obtain the Golden Fleece and save the camp. So I may not be fully too much on the likes of the series in general, I don't know too much on it in terms of reading the books, but I'm interested in checking them out at some point, and I can see that it seems to be showing a lot more appeal and promise compared to the two films of the late 2000s, which covered just mainly these two first books. And it seems like there's some hope that some of this fan favorite characters from the books will be interesting to see how they appeal with the overall aesthetic of it, and the likes of the first season will still be present in this one of the appeal and popularity. But I guess we will see if God becomes unleashed once more in due time, with new season starting in about a month's time on December 10th. And with all that regards, that's all the trailers that we do have for this week.
Let me guess. Spring cleaning.
So we have two somewhat small news stories this week in focus, with the first one containing a selection of some announcements of planned release date projections and a slight delay of some other projects in particular, but let's delve into what those projects are set to entail and we'll be expecting and when we can expect them to. First, we're talking a story that was initially brought up a few weeks ago as one of these episodes, and we're talking a trip over to Netflix once more this episode, as we're talking on the most much watched project on the streamer's history, as we're talking on the popular film of Kpop Demon Hunters. Now, since its release in June of this year, this project has really took off popularity with its acclaimed film, taking success at the box office over big heavy hitters, even when the film was a streaming title, and the artists singing and playing the characters going platinum, and the iconic song of Golden just this week getting 4 Grammy nominations for said song. That it really seems this project is making a name for itself and seems primed for more. Well, those prayers have been answered, as is early this week we were given the case that not only a sequel of this film is confirmed, but also has a release year projected, with the film aiming for release sometime in 2029, giving the film about 4 years to work on it and make the animation as appealing as the original. Now, a 4-year gap I feel is reasonable, as it would fit the tone of another acclaimed and popular series of the studio of Sony, and that is with, of course, the Spider-Verse trilogy, as it seems that each film in this trilogy takes about 4 to 5 years, with the last part coming in June 2027. So I see the 4 years and reasonable to make it work. Now, I feel and hope that this will have the same appeal and outcome as the original and have another great story, characters, and catchy songs to listen to as well, but I guess we will see as it gets close to that planned release window. And in any case, any new updates or news comes about this project, I will of course bring it up in a later episode. Then from musicians fighting monsters and demons to the focus of talking on the return of some specific creatures and monsters, we have been given some updates about the return of an 80s classic creature featured this week, as after 35 years since the sequel came along, it was announced earlier this year that director Chris Columbus was working on a third entry of the Gremlins series, and it was just actually announced this week that we have now a projected release date window, with the film set for release by Warner Bros. On November 19th, 2027, making about 2 years away from the release of the follow-up. Now, not much else is really known of the follow-up besides Columbus set to direct the film, and the other name that's involved in the project is Steven Spielberg, set to be a executive producer on it. I'm sure there'll be some ideas soon enough of what we can expect the third entry, or they might take inspiration from some other fan film ones, like Red Alert Media had some really crazy outcome one for this, but I guess we'll see as more time comes along about this development, and in case of any new updates on this comes about from the creatives or studio, I'll of course bring it up in a later episode as well. Lastly, on dates, this one is probably not a surprise or has been seen by many, but on Thursday it was announced that the highly anticipated sequel of Grand Theft Auto 6 has been delayed once again for a second time and will now release 6 months later on November 17th, 2026, instead of the initial release date of May 26th next year, or even the fall planned date for this year. Now, this was suspected by some that will happen. In the case with Rockstar, this is not a new thing, as most of their recent titles saw some form of delays, with Red Dead 2 announced in October 2016 for a summer 2017 release, before it got 2 delays to October 2018. And GTA 5 also saw this happen on initial 2012 release date before being pushed to spring 2013, before finally releasing in September 17, 2013. So it's expected to do this to probably avoid major crunch, and maybe also do with some recent layoffs, about 40 staff across the UK and Canada-based studios that saw a lot of supposedly gross misconduct, but I think it's just to stop unionizing. That's what I've heard, and cause a whole protest outside the UK studios. A part of me also feels like the reason for this delay was due to some early reports a few weeks ago that the game and developers were having some issues with the later part of the story, and we're still figuring it out. But it may be a case they had on track to resolve it, or may have needed that extra 6 months. But I can see how it turns out. Now, do I see this getting a delay? I will say kind of unlikely. They're promising this is trying to be their last delay, or if it does, it will not be for like a big delay. It'll probably be like the smallest of like about a week or two, or the max is like a month. But I'm sure they will make it out in the best they can and live up to the expectations many have had for it for a decade at this point. But I guess we'll see by the release come November of next year. But what do you make of these release windows? Are you excited for a Kpop Demon Hunter sequel? Will you be watching a third Gremlins film? And do you see GTA 6 stick to that new release date or be delayed into early 2027? Let me know what you think down below in the comments. As for our second story this week, is more to focus some announcements, whether it's a return to a franchise with some returning faces, new additions, or a title with possible release date attached to it as well, but we will see what this selection will entail. So our first one, we saw a lot of appeal and surprise many earlier this week, as it seems we may be returning to another classic adventure film of the 90s, after a strong selection of strong start, two disappointing outcomes, and the question of the upcoming new take on the series in the next few months, and has to do with the franchise of The Mummy. As it was reported earlier this week that a fourth film in the series that is based on the series in the 90s is reportedly in the works, and we'll all see the return of both Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz into the film as well, which may appeal to a lot of people. Now, not much is currently known, but it's reported the film was supposed to connect to the first two films and basically retcon Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, or has any connections at all to the 2017 reboot, because that's its own separate thing that started and ended the Dark Universe, which will seem like an interesting outlook to see what will come of this, and will be a welcome return for these two again for another adventure fighting against an ancient evil entity in Egypt. Now, nothing has been fully confirmed as of yet, besides the plan to make this project, so we'll be a bit of ways for release on this, but in the case of anything new just come up about it, I'll of course provide that in a later episode. Now, next on some of the news was with a story I initially talked about a little while ago, and that's to do with some casting updates for a planned sequel to last year's Roadhouse reboot. And it was a case that a little while ago I talked about wrestler turned actor Dave Bautista was eyeing a role in the sequel, but nothing was confirmed as of yet. But that changed this week. The news was confirmed with his casting this follow-up, as well as a selection of new additions and names to the film, which also includes the likes of Lila George from More Legends, Aldous Hodge from Invisible Man, Peter Sarsgaard from Magnificent Seven, Rob Delaney from Deadpool and Wolverine, Andrew Batchelor from King Botch, Aiku Wise from The Raid, Hidetoshi Nishijima from Drive My Car, and a whole array of UFC fighters, including Dustin Pryor, Michael Vernon Page, Rico Verhoeven, Jay Hiram, Michael Chandler, Stephen Thompson, and Tyron Woodley to round out a massive stacked cast for this follow-up. Now, it seems like quite the cast is being established this follow-up, and looks to be said to be bigger and more brutal than the last entry, and confirmed that one supposed fighter from that first movie is thankfully not returning, and it'll be interesting to see what will come to this project in terms of plot-wise. Now, at the moment as well, there is no set release date on this one either, but if anything new does come along about this, I will provide that as well in a later episode. Now, our next project in focus is with another new title coming to us that has some elements based on the creations from one Jim Henson. As well, I talked about a project a few weeks back confirming a new special based on the Muppets was on the way sometime next year, being produced by Seth Rogen and has a guest star Sabrina Carpenter. That's been planned as a backdoor pilot for a new series. It's not the only project in the works on the world of these characters, as was announced this week that a new film based on the popular character from the series of Miss Piggy is also reported to be in the works, with a project being produced by Oscar-winning actors of Jennifer Lawrence and Emma Stone, which seems like a very interesting approach to this tale. Now, I wonder what the approach to this movie will entail, if it's having some big production of glitz and glamour that is fit for this Muppet character, or if it be more of a smaller, grounded approach, similar to the likes of the Kermit Swamp Years movie from the early 2000s. But I will be interested to see what will come in this project, and hopefully we'll see a revival of the Muppets for these two projects and see more projects to come about this. Now, like the other two projects I've already mentioned, it's unknown of when this film will start releasing, or if any updates to this project is due in any aspect or firmed yet, but I will hear anything about this. I'll of course provide that in later episode as well. Lastly, it's with the announcement from this week with follow-up of the film that came out around 2 years ago and gave us one of the best interpretations of this kaiju monster himself. As this week, we got the confirmation of the title to the Oscar-winning film of Godzilla -1, with the title now set to be known as Godzilla -0. It also may be given a projected release window for the new follow-up as well, reported to be set release in late 2026, with filming set to begin either the end of this year or start of next year in New Zealand and Norway, which I feel could work out for the release window, but could be pushed into 2027, who knows. Now, I really enjoyed -1 entry, and I'll be checking this one out, and hopefully it'll be as entertaining and appealing as that one, and bring us to the appeal of all these films based on the iconic kaiju that we've been getting for the last decade or so, and when we hear anything new about this follow-up, I will provide it in a later episode as well. But what do you think of these stories? Are you excited for a fourth Mummy movie with Fraser and Wise? What are your thoughts on this stacked cast of the Roadhouse follow-up? Will you watch a new film based on Miss Piggy, and are you excited for a -1 sequel? Let me think down below in the comments, and with all that regards, that's all the new news stories that we do have for this week. And now with all this cards now, that ends episode 129 of Weird My Newsroom, and I hope you enjoyed this, my ramblings, ever-changing lengths of weekly ramblings, of course. Anyways, let's get into some updates in this regards. Right, starting the reviews. I'm going to get back to doing some long-form reviews and stuff like that. I've been very absent in terms of reviews this year. I will get to around to the Last of Us seasons. I will get to maybe a review on the Stranger Things stuff. I'll get to Wicked. I'm going to get some long-form stuff. As well as the case, I'll get to the other Snack Size box office video reviews that are coming out as well, which will be a case of like If, Civil War, How to Train Your Dragon. I might do a few other ones as well in that regards. I have a few films to catch up on the last 2 months or so look forward to those reviews eventually. Gameplay wise, I hope you enjoyed. If you haven't checked it out yet, I have the full series of Pillow Nightmares uploaded now on my channel. Choose the first game and DLC for the first one, The Secret of the Maw. I will be getting back to record some more stuff for like DK Bonanza, Mario Wonder, Cyberpunk, Star Wars, and a few other games. I might do a few more horror titles in there as well, because I feel like I didn't really do too much, but I just been like didn't have much motivation and stuff like that for different things, so apologies on delays stuff if it's just been the last few weeks and stuff like that, so just bear with me. I'm trying to get around to doing more stuff of that. And in case of long form stuff, in case of that, I will get to Horror Mouse Board Volume 2, I will get to the Lego Time Lapse video, I will get to the Rewatchathon, I'll get to the Honest Choice video, I'll get to some other bits and pieces like from gameplay wise, I'll get to Ventilate and everything like that. I will get to a few of these bits and pieces here and there, so look forward to those over time as well. Just apologies on the delay and stuff, just things have been a bit all over the place again. Anyway, but enough of that, guards. I shall leave the episode there for now. So if you like my content, want to see more from me and more frequently, then simply like and subscribe. I'm aiming to have 500 subs by the end of this year, so if there's a chance to hopefully get that, I will appreciate every single one of you that gives me a chance with this regards. Let me know your thoughts and everything that's discussed this week down below in the comments, from like the new releases, if you've seen any of them and what your thoughts on them, your opinions on the trailers that we talked about this week, as well as the thoughts on the news stories in this regards. And in those cases as well, if you want to get yourself some pure crack, you can use my code Sam Harrison at the link down below to save 10% off your order. And yeah, that's basically all I have to talk about. So I'm gonna leave it there for now. As always, you all stay wonderful people. Have a great day every day, do many great things, and keeping you because no one else can do what you do. Of course, I've been your host Sam, of course, and I shall see you all in the next episode, of course, of that. So take care. I shall see you later.